everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour in the Spiritual Neighborhood. Today, we're going to talk with Matthew Pierce, who's one of our co hosts, and he's going to tell us some amazing stories. Matthew is a life coach, a business coach, a reader, teacher, psychic medium, and a trance channeler. He Let's see, his motto is, if I succeed, you succeed. If you succeed, I succeed. I said that backwards. He has a metaphysical degree from the University of Metaphysics in Sedona, Arizona. And he's been coaching people all over the world, well, longer than, but his degree was in 2023. Right. So, Matthew, take it away. Tell us what we want to know.
Gosh, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I think I'd like to start just by saying about my degree. I do have my doctorate in metaphysics and counseling and life coaching from the University of Metaphysics in Sedona, Arizona. And it took me probably about between 8 to 10 years to get it. So I was on the really like a slow track. And kind of one of the reasons is that life just happened. I had signed up long ago to actually start classes, and I started the classes and I just dove into them with all I could. And then when I started going through the master's program and then also the doctorate program, like life just really sped up and I kind of just lost touch with it. So I had, I stepped away from it for a long time. And 2023, 2024, I kind of made the decision. It was like, you know what, I paid this money for this, and I was really devoted to it. So I might as well just put it into high gear and go back and finish this up. And so, that's kind of what I did. I've been working in the community as far as like, I don't know if you want to call me a metaphysician, but I don't think that's the right word for it. But just being there for the community and helping people out, whether it be, lending, my skills as a reader or, a channeler or a medium. I've been helping people for years, even without my doctorate. Now with the doctorate, I hate labels. I don't necessarily go by Dr. Matthew Pierce or require everyone to call me Dr. Matthew Pierce, because it just means that I have a little bit more knowledge. I read a little bit more books, and that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So that's about my degree, and so that's why people call me Dr. Matthew Pierce.
But well, life gets in the way. I started my degree, my schooling over again in 1990, and so that was in my 40s.
Yeah. And I think it's worth it. I mean, just to have that schooling. I've never been the person that had the mindset of you need to go to school in order to have the great job, or you need to go to school to, get ahead in life. And of course, that was instilled in me, from a very young age, that if you study hard enough, that's what's going to make you happy, because you're going to have a good job, you're going to be able to have money, and so on and so forth. It doesn't always happen that way.
No, it doesn't.
I tell people that I have a friend. He's a really good friend. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was a neurosurgeon, and he was going through a life change. And so he said he literally had his hands in someone's brain, and it just dawned on him, like spirit just came to him and said, "This isn't you." And he's like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And so he finished up the surgery, and he walked out the door. And as he was walking by, he told the charge nurse, he says, "My resignation will be on like the whomever's desk tomorrow morning." And he quit. Now you have to understand that this man was making money. I mean, hand over fist. I mean, he had enough money. Okay. And so you would think that, well, Spirit would call him to do something more with his medical field and everything else like that. And so I say that as the beginning of the story, because Do you know what he's doing now?
I give up.
He has a pack of alpaca in Montana, and he and his wife actually create products from the alpaca hair. So they do
Okay.
scarves and they do hats and they do boots and leggings and all kinds of stuff that they make from the alpaca fur. And you would not, I mean, you wouldn't recognize who he is. He's just the most happiest, most carefree person that you could ever imagine in the world.
Oh,
He's like, I went from making millions of dollars a year, to making like 45 or $50,000 a year, but it keeps him happy. That's exactly what he does. So, what was the last thing you heard? I mean, I think I was talking about my
the
friend
last
that,
thing I heard was about him, uh, how happy he was with his alpacas.
yeah. And so I say to people that, like, do you need to go to school to be able to be happy and to be able to be content with your life?
No,
I don't think so. I think that you need to follow your bliss. I think that you need to follow what harmonizes inside of you, what makes you joyful for what you do.
right.
I've worked for corporate America for, 25, 30 years before I realized that, what, this doesn't work for me. Having someone tell me what to do and how I should be doing it, there's, I guess, a time frame that it's enough. So I get the opportunity to, do exactly what I want to do and be happy about it. And, are there struggles sometimes with the money? Sure. But, there's other times that the universe takes care of me and I'm completely okay. But I'm happier than I ever have been. So,
Well, that's what counts. I had my dream job in the OR for many years, and then I went to work at the on the in the educational fields to be with my kids more. I mean, I made that conscious decision, and that's made me happy to be with them.
so when you made that decision, because I know when I made the decision to step out, it was very scary for me because I mean, I didn't know what to expect, because I went from having a job to not having a job. For you, there was a transition
Yeah.
wise. So I know for me, it was very scary. But I guess I take it as like a step of faith. A lot of people are like, well, I can't do that. I have to have something, as a sure footing. But I just had that feeling that I knew that everything was going to be okay, that I knew that everything was going to be fine, and that I wasn't going to have to be concerned. Not that I would ever have like a concern, quote unquote, but I didn't. I understood that the universe was going to take care of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of those I know this will work kind of
Yeah,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah. So since that time, I've had experiences that are like just a range of experiences, from mediumship to trance channeling to ghost hunting and clearing houses, and just all the other things, with learning all the tools that I have, tarot, oracle, and all of those types of things. It's been quite an adventure. um, I I guess if you want to hear the backstory, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I could see corporeal people who have crossed.
Hmm.
We lived in an old farmhouse that was there before the Civil War. It actually used to be the old mercantile. And after the Civil War, they built the second story up on top. And it was interesting because people say, well, how old, really, how old was the house? And the actual rooms, downstairs and upstairs, they had horsehair plaster.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And so they would take really small slits of wood. Okay, and then that's how they would build the frame, and then we take horsehair and plaster, and they would plaster together and pat it on the walls,
Yeah.
from both
So
sides.
so the first time you saw someone, you knew it was a person. So
Yeah.
what was your first thought?
Well, I knew there was something different, but if I mean, 8 years old, I was just kind of like, "Hi, why are you here?" It
Hmm.
didn't really scare me. It didn't like have like a spooky feeling to it or anything else like that. my first experience, I mean, his name was Amos, and he looked like a slave. I mean, he had his battered hat, and was dressed in kind of the garb of the
Mhm.
time that he was living. And I thought that you just had on a costume. I just
Yeah.
thought that it's like, well, and believe it or not, it was actually around Halloween. So I thought that my parents had invited someone in. I was like, oh, hey, what's up? Um, and when I told my parents, they were like, "Mm, no, no, I don't think so." And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, he's like upstairs, like right now, he couldn't have come down without us seeing him. So, right, and my dad's like running up the stairs, and so he was like, there's no one here. And so I kind of put it down a little bit, and we had some friends over, and the one of the friends she was the historian of the area. And so she knew all about the different plantations, and she knew about different. And this is Western Pennsylvania, so this was just outside of about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh. And so she knew about all the Indian tribes, and she knew about everything that went on, the history of the area. And she said something, and it sparked, I guess, something in my head. And I said, yeah, well, that's what Amos told me. And of course, my dad's like,
Who's Amos?
and like, well, what? Okay, well, what did he say? And so I said, I told her, and it just happened to be, she's like, that's really interesting. And so she did a little research and found out that kind of what I said was the truth. And she came back to me. She's like, well, you must be a history buff. How did you find out about this, and so on and so forth? What book did you read? And I was like, Amos told me. And she's like, okay. And so the more that we talked, the more that Amos started coming to me and telling me these things. And it started sparking something inside of the conversation that I was having with this historian. And through that, and through the digging, pieces started fitting together. And she's like, yeah, you're really seeing him. And she was the first person to like actually believe that, like, it wasn't just an imaginary friend, it was
Right.
someone who was like had firsthand knowledge
Mhm.
of the thing. And so, um, long story short, I grew up in the church. And so, of course, inside of the church, that was taboo. You didn't talk to dead people. You didn't, do that kind of stuff.
And you
You had to,
certainly didn't see them, right?
yeah, exactly. And so I kind of put that away for a long time. And I mean, especially through college, I didn't do, the mediumship work. I didn't do the psychic work, and I just kind of left that go. Um, and it wasn't until like much later in life that I kind of rediscovered that. And I think a lot of people go through the same thing, that that either they have like experiences in their younger years that kind of put that sense of intuitiveness down a little bit, and they don't realize it until like a little bit later on in life. So I mean, I don't know what your experience is, with that. I mean, have you always been intuitive? Have you always felt that way?
Yes, I think so. And I think that I don't remember a specific time, but you know, as a child, you just didn't, oh, well, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so my first occurrence may have been when my father passed. I had this very premonition. It was just huge. And I guess I paid attention that time because it was so traumatic. And I continued to have those premonitions off and on. So yeah, I think that I always had it. I think that someone in my family said, well, you can't see people who are dead.
Yeah. My dad was kind of surprised at me, and because he said somewhat similar to that, is like, well, no, you're not supposed to be talking to the dead. You're not supposed to be, interacting, with the
Hmm.
dead.
Hmm.
And I was always a smart ass, and I actually
No, really? Hmm.
I told my dad, I was like, well, then you better reprimand Jesus as well. And he's like, why would I do that? And I was like, well, there's this man named Lazarus. and Lazarus was dead, and Lazarus came back to life, and he was talking with him. So therefore, number one, Jesus talked to the dead because he called him out of the tomb, and number two, he kept talking with him because he became his best friend. So, you can't say that the Bible has something to say about not being able to talk to people who have crossed or talk to people who have, are no longer with us. I think that our family has, incredible ties, ancestrally speaking. I think that they watch over us. I think that they guide us and they direct us. I think that we have friends that when they cross over, they're right there with us. One of my dear friends, Joseph, is still with me. He crossed of unfortunate circumstances, but he's one of the people that will come to me corporally. I mean, like physically be here with me, and sit down with me and say, you know what, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And give me that sense of encouragement. I don't think I've ever had a occurrence with an entity or an experience with a spirit that has ever been like really negative, that I would have felt like I was in danger and harm. I've definitely felt some fear sometimes. I'm sure that you probably have been in the situations where it's just the energy around you doesn't feel right. I know that you do like, spiritual investigations and, ghost trips and ghost tours and things of that nature. And I think that it's really misunderstood that at least I don't go to provoke. I go to find out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's what we do at DFW investigations. I've forgotten what we call it, but we go to find out if what's happening is really happening, or is the person incorrect, or maybe there's something loose in the house, or I mean, we're going to find out, is it the real deal, with no expectations before you go.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, is not having the expectations, and yeah, I have so many stories about the mediumship work that I've done, and people sometimes will come to you and they just don't believe. They're just like, no, someone told me to come, but I don't believe that, that it's that. Well, let me tell you one story. I was being a guest reader at a metaphysical shop, and a woman and her daughter came. Her daughter was the one that kind of drug her mom along and was like, come on, mom, let's go, let's go, let's go. And so I knew from the point where they stepped in the room that the mom was just like,
yeah, closed off.
Yeah, exactly. I don't believe this. I don't want to believe this. I don't want any part of it. And the daughter was the one that was into it, was the one that was asking questions and so on and so forth. And she turns to her mom and she goes, well, Mom, what do you want to know? And she goes, well, I don't subscribe to this. I mean, it's going to have to be something so like so profound, that there's just no way that I can,
deny it. Right.
And all of a sudden, and this is a lesson for me too, is that you have to trust spirit, because they're going to get to those people however they need to get to them. I saw Mickey Mouse skipping through a field of flowers. And of course, in my head, I'm going, I'm not saying that. I'm not going to put that out there, because that's just
and
like,
spirit keeps showing it to you.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. I'm not going to do that. I was like, I have no idea what that means. And the more that I talked, it was just, it kept on happening over and over and over again. And I said, okay, listen, I have to say this. And I was like, you take it for what it is. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I was like, but I see Mickey Mouse skipping through a field of flowers. And he is just ecstatic. He's skipping through a field of flowers. And the daughter was just like, and I was like, does that mean something to you? I was like, because for me, that it sounds silly.
Yeah.
And she turns to her mom and she goes, Mom, show him. And mom's like, and she goes, Mom, show him. So apparently, after I can't remember the whole circumstances, but after they were coming to see me, they were going to go to a place to have some pictures framed. Okay. So the mom takes and opens up her purse, and she had one of those bigger purses. Okay. And she pulls out kind of an 8x10, I guess an 8x10, and she shoves it across the table at me. And she says, "That's my husband." And he's standing right next to Walt Disney. It turns out that her husband was one of the lead horticulturists at Walt Disney World, and he was one of the leads that created Mickey's garden. So he planted the flowers and he planted the field that surrounds the attraction that is now Mickey's Playhouse or Mickey's House or Mickey's Garden, or I can't remember what it's called. And I was like, okay, well, he's here. And she just like tears. She's like, there's no way that you could have known that. There's no way that
and I wasn't going to say it either.
Yeah, I was like, I was going to say it. She goes, well, I'm glad you did. And so from that point on, the messages just started becoming very, very clear, and when she was asking questions, he would like emote, and just be like, I'm sorry, I left you. It was the time that it wasn't the right time for me. It was cut short, and she confirmed all of this. And I mean, by the end, all of us were crying. All of us were sitting there, just like, wow. Okay. So, I mean, I've learned a couple lessons. Number one is like when spirit gives us something, okay, that we think is like absolutely, off the wall, just give it, because it might not mean something to you, but it might mean something to them.
It's about trusting what you're hearing, what you're seeing. Just say it. If it doesn't resonate with them, that's fine. But you got to say it.
Yeah. And it's funny not funny. It's interesting that you say what you say, is because sometimes you have those people that would just be like, no, whatever you would say to them, no. And I had an older lady that came to me one time, and she came there for a reading, and she'd been there a couple other times. Okay, and I had read for her. And she sat down, and the first thing that I started seeing was teddy bears. I mean, it was just like these cute, cuddly teddy bears, the white nose, and the blue, blue, what do you call it, bow on their neck. And just, I mean, and so I was like, okay, well, I was like, the first thing that's coming up for me is teddy bears. And she leaned across. I mean, son, I don't want teddy bears. I don't need teddy bears. She goes, I have kids that don't want teddy bears. I have great grandkids that don't want teddy bears. And she goes, I even have great grandchildren that don't want teddy bears. She goes, so you're wrong. There's just no way that teddy bears are showing up around me. And I was like, okay, I get it. I understand. And I always tell people the same thing. I was like, well, if a teddy bear does show up, okay, something significant is about to happen. Like, take a look around and go, okay, what's going on here? Because it's like a little guidepost or a signpost, it's like something's happening. So kind of watch out. So this is right around the beginning of February. It was the beginning of the month, because I remember it was like one of the fairs that happened at the beginning of the month. And she came back the next month, and she sat down. She goes, I owe you an apology. Oops. And I was like, why? And she goes, well, remember the teddy bear? And I was like, yeah. She goes, well, I just happened to be seeing a really special guy. And she was an older lady, of course. And she was like, I'm seeing this special guy. And, he took me out to a Valentine's dinner. And he really surprised me, because, he remembered about one of my favorite restaurants, and he rented a whole like little cubby area, had it decorated with drapes. I mean, she said he went all out. I mean, it was the fine china. It was everything. The huge flowers, the bouquet of flowers in the center of the table, and it was candlelit, and he had some of my favorite music playing in the background. She goes, he just made it incredibly special. And so as he's walking me toward the table, we kind of passed by the curtains, she said, and in her chair was sitting a giant teddy bear. And she turned to him and she goes, "You don't have to say it." And he's like, "What? Is there something wrong?" And she said, "I kissed him and said, yes, I'll marry you." And he's like, "Wait a second. Whoa, 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 wait a second." He goes, "How did you know that I was going to ask you to marry me?" And she looked over and she said, "The teddy bear told me." And so spirit's very interesting when it comes to being able to get their point across or being able to tell you those things.
Oh
And
yeah.
sometimes you just have to, to put it out there, and let people figure it out on their own.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Because I,
so,
I was reading for a young lady that I didn't know she was going to get married, but I was like, okay, so what do you have to do with Ireland? Because I keep getting this picture of Ireland, but she goes, "Oh, I'm going to get married there." And I was like, all right, that would be a big event. And so let's see what else. But you just don't, I mean, you're here in Dallas, Texas, reading for somebody, and what in the world would Ireland have to do with it? But you have to put it out there.
well, I know that I was doing readings here, but I also would do readings in Houston at one time. And I remember that when I got down to Houston, and I had a woman come to me, and she sat down, and she was one of those people that she was lost. I mean, she had some people that she wanted to talk to that had crossed, and so on and so forth. And I remember that I started getting all the information. It was coming out wrong. To me, it was coming out wrong. I mean, I even gave her money back and said, "So I'm sorry, I can't help you. I don't know what's happening or what's going on, but I'm just not connecting. I'm just not connecting." And sometimes it happens,
Yeah.
sometimes it happens. And she's like, "No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And she said, "Can I take your card? In case, maybe you will come up with something and I might have a question." I was like, "Yeah, sure. Absolutely. You just go ahead. We'll stay in touch." So as I was driving back the next day, I get a phone call and I pick up the phone. And I was like, "Hello, this is Matthew." And she goes, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I came to see you yesterday." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, I remember you." And she goes, "Well, I want to tell you that you helped me more than you realize." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "But if I remember correctly, I wasn't able to help you. I wasn't able to connect. I wasn't able to, help you reach those people." And she goes, "That's not the reason I was there." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, I'm not understanding what was the reason that you were there. No, she goes, "Oh, I was there for me. I wanted to talk to someone." She goes, "But everything that you were giving to me was for someone else." She said, "So I want to tell you," she goes, I got home from the fair and my daughter was there and she was there with a friend. And so I've decided to do a little snack and put some snacks out, but I was kind of upset. And so I started kind of unloading, on my daughter and saying, "Well, this is what he told me. And this is what he told me. And, how could that be? That's farthest from the truth. And that could be that," and so on and so forth. And they said that they were sitting on that little island in the center of the kitchen, and all of a sudden the daughter's friend starts bawling.
Uh-oh.
And she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, what's going on? What's happening? What's happening?" And she goes, and she started pointing out, she goes, I don't think that he was connecting with who you wanted." She goes, "But I think he was connecting with who I need."
Oh.
And started telling her the story about. I mean, one of the first things I came up with, like her mom's sneakerdoodle recipe. Like I could
Hmm.
smell them, I could taste them. I mean, it was so poignant. And she was like, "No, don't like snickerdoodles." Okay. One of the things that the daughter and her friend were talking about is like going to the store and getting the ingredients to make snickerdoodles, because her friend just had this recipe, had it memorized when that's what she wanted. Well, they didn't have a chance before her mom got him. Anyway, a long story short, it was like one thing after another that her mom was complaining that I couldn't give her. It wasn't actually for her, it was actually for the friend's
The
daughter.
friend of the daughters.
And so through me and then through the mom, the person got the message that they needed to get. So spirit can be kind of tricky that way as well. And I love spirit for doing that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, she's like, I want to pay you. And I was like, you know what? No. I was like, the reason that it happened the way that it happened was for you to give the message to them. I really believe that she had that in her as well. And that when she got home, it was just like that springboard for her intuition to come into play and for her to connect with, the friend's mom.
Yes, I believe that we all have it. We just haven't developed it.
Mm-hmm. And I do too. I know I have people that have come to me that said, no, I'm just not intuitive. I'm just not intuitive. And I was like, I think that everybody has some sort of, of intuitiveness.
So have you ever had an instant where a friend came to you? Now I hadn't seen this friend in forever. I talked to her a couple times, text, blah, blah, blah. And she had her hands crossed like this. And she said, okay, what am I thinking right now? Well, immediately I knew she was angry, and she was angry with me, and I didn't know why. And I said, I have no idea. And she goes, exactly right. You're not psychic. And she walked off. And I went, okay, that's interesting. So she was angry at me because I had said that I was psychic. And because I couldn't tell her how she felt, I didn't want to tell her how she felt. Does that make sense?
Total sense. Makes
I mean, if her facial and her arms had not alerted me, her energy certainly would have. She had been sending that dagger energy at me all night. And I thought, what have I done to her? What happened here?
Yeah.
So I just denied it. And I said, you're right.
And that can happen. I mean, I have friends that are be like, oh, that's Matt. Let him do what he wants to do. And there are other people that they kind of subscribe to me being a psychic, but it's not their thing. It's not like I'm out to like convert them, into like, knowing that psychics are real or they have their own ability, to, be their own psychic. I don't do that. I kind of meet people where they're at. If they are in disagreement, they're in disagreement. I'm not going to try to convince them that they're wrong.
Right.
I was.
Well,
I was.
I think it's difficult for people to accept it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in the church. I mean, if you would have told me that I was going to be doing this, 25, 30 years ago, I would have been like, no.
No.
I was like, yeah, we're not doing that, So it's just one of those things that you kind of step into. And I think spirit leads us to our own strengths and our own weaknesses, Well, one of the things that I really, really like want to acknowledge you and Deborah for is taking on and designing your deck of cards. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is so much, there's so much in that. And people don't understand that when you take your soul or you take the things that you're feeling and put them into a conscious, concrete thing, okay, it takes on a life all of its own. Okay.
It does.
And I've not done it yet. I want to, and I just haven't. It's kind of like my doctorate. It's like I want to do it, but I haven't stepped into it yet. So I want to acknowledge you all doing it in the first place.
Well, it was something I always wanted to do. No one else had. Everybody else was like, I don't want to do that.
Well, let me ask you a question, because now that I've said all that, what gave you the determination to be able to finish it?
Well, Deborah said, I have these cards that my friend and I designed, and the words that we wanted to put on them. And I'm not sure. I was trying to remember if I actually saw the cards. I don't remember. But we went through the words and we decided that some were duplicates and some really meant the same thing. And uh, so we decided on 52, um, just single or short descriptions. And when we did that, then I personally went through thousands of pictures, what I thought matched with the words. And I actually would run them by um, Deborah, and sometimes we would agree and sometimes we wouldn't. And so if there's no agreement, then I would go back and look for different ones. But I think that I just poured a lot of energy into it. It's why you feel that energy in the cards.
And it's interesting because I think you came up with the perfect words. Okay. And I think that's where I mess up, because I look at it and I go, well, that means something different to me. I really need to make this about what's going to be like right for them. I don't necessarily have a Deborah that I can run things past. When I have an idea, and sometimes my idea can be like completely and totally out there. But I just I love that you have your own deck, and that's kind of something that I aspire to as well. So
Well,
that's kind of one of
there
the
are
things.
such things as hiring an artist and having them interpret what you want to. That's more expensive, but that's more personal.
Yeah, but I also have this thing is that like I'm a graphic designer, so if I do that, I kind of feel that I'm betraying myself, and
Well,
not
then
using
you need to do your
talents.
own artwork.
But that's even harder.
Don't give me that.
I know.
Because because right now you're doing classes at Miracles of Joy, right?
I am. I am. Yeah. So, I mean, we've had some amazing, amazing classes there. I'm starting to get back into teaching and back into doing the fairs. I have kind of a following that is following me for, I would say coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I have people that some people that I'm coaching right now. And so helping them with their spiritual businesses, and helping them realize that, they're not stuck. They're just, not seeing the possibilities, that they have inside of their life just yet. So, I mean, I love being there to be the springboard for people. And I know maybe that's the reason why I'm not doing the cards is that, people come to me and ask me like, how about this? How about this? How about this? So eh, to me, I love doing it. I just absolutely love doing it. I have my background in web development and graphic design, and have worked for the advertising and industry for years upon years upon years. And like I said, when I finally just made the decision to jump off ship, I have the ability to do anything that I want. So it's like, now what do I do? So
Well, I think that we all kind of we do one thing to make money and another thing to fill our well, so to speak.
I, that's a good way to look at it. I like the filler wells, because I can tell you, people say, well, we see you at these psychic fairs and you're going and going and going and going and going. It's like you don't take breaks or anything like that. What, don't you get tired? At the end of the day, aren't you exhausted?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to say, no, I'm not. It might be physically that I'm a little like, I'm ready to stop, but it's not like I'm physically tired. I mean, most of the
No,
time, I would say probably 95% of the time, it energizes me. It like really, really gets me going, and takes me from, if I went in with a level of like, and like that, it takes me up to that level of like, I'm excited about life again. So,
because I
um,
think there's a certain vibration you have to meet to do the job, to do the work that we do.
yeah,
And you're up there on that level, just waiting, to give the best message you can give.
yeah. One of the things that actually happened a couple months ago, is I got accused of. Uh, This is the truth. I got accused of paying people to come see me. Yeah. It was just people were coming to me one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, and people were like, "What's going on with him?" I mean, and they were like accusing the people at the front for like recommending me too much, and I mean, it was just they were trying to figure out. And when they actually approached me, I was like, "Well, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way?" And they're like, "Well, because of this." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "It's like, first of all, if someone shows up for me, then they're supposed to see me. Okay. The way that I feel about it is the universe is going to bring to you the people that need to hear the message that you have for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just put yourself in a spirit of receiving and just be okay with whatever happens, great. You know, I've had fairs that I've gone and I've had one person all day. Okay.
Right.
That one person was the person that I needed to talk to and needed the message that I had. I don't get upset with it. I don't get upset with it at all because I was there for exactly that one person. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, if I have a great day.
yeah, I was doing the psychic fair in McKinney, and I very rarely would have my schedule full. And I thought, well, there's something I'm supposed to learn from all this. There's so I finally did leave there, but it was about me scheduling other things to do. Yes, I can give good messages. Yes, I'm there. But by sitting there all day long and not making any money, I thought, wow, this is a total waste of my time. And I spent more time with my herbs and things.
Yeah.
There's a reason for everything.
But yeah, there is a reason for everything. And I think that when we actually get comfortable with just being okay
Mm-hmm.
with kind of where we're at, what's going on, that I mean, ultimately that's going to bring you more peace.
Mm-hmm.
Could I be doing something else other than being at a psychic fair? Yeah, I probably could be. You know, but if I don't give people the opportunity to come see me, okay, and be in front of me, then they're not going to do it. You
Well,
know,
when you were talking about spending all that time, I remember at the venue we went to, the party event,
yeah.
I read from the time I got there to the time I left
Mhm.
for 4 hours. I
Yeah.
never even had the idea that I was going to get up and go to the bathroom. I mean, it was like I just sat there because I felt connected to giving the messages.
Yeah. And
So,
that's one thing that's really great about Miles of Smalls Entertainment is that we saw this happen. We see this happening all the time. Is that when we're together in a group of people, it's like people are drawn to us. Okay, you had started off in the morning, doing readings, and someone was waiting for you, and I think it was Deborah that said, "Well, Matt does readings too. Would you like
mhm.
a reading from him?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And then all of a sudden, it was like everybody at the table from Miles to Smiles Entertainment was like giving readings. We
Mhm.
had like a crowd of people around the table that were just lining up to get readings from us, which to me is like, I love that. I love that we can kind of offer that as a service, but also a form of entertainment. And people loved it. I mean, people absolutely loved it. But I also, again, I feel from the spiritual perspective, the people that we saw that day were the people we need to talk with.
And we don't hold back our intuition just because it's entertainment. I
Thank you.
mean,
That's
they
really
get the
important.
real thing.
Yeah. I think that, and forgive me for saying this because I know that I might get some flack for this. There are people that do the psychic stuff for entertainment only.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm one of those people that I won't do it for just the entertainment purposes only. If I'm going, entertainment is the secondary. Giving and being with people and giving my message to them, that's the primary thing. Okay.
Because that is keeping your integrity.
Exactly. In the past there have been people who says, well, hey, would you do this, because we need this. And I don't know, I just get this feeling of like, that's just not integrity. No, I can't. you know? And like, you're passing up on money. And I was like, I'll pass up on money anytime that like spirit says to me, no, we're
If
not.
it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, this does not feel right. I mean, if I'm not led to do it, yeah, no, I don't think
Yes, but let's tell the story of kiss print readings. The one that you said, oh, I just really don't see this.
I don't. At the point, I was just like, you know what? I don't see the point of it. I don't see how I still kind of looked at it as gimmicky, you know. But I will be the first person to admit I was unlearned. I didn't have an experience. I didn't have any education or any kind of background. I was just going from that gut feeling of like, really, you know. And then I
Mm-hmm.
started working, and it was like one of those things that at the time, just previous to that, like it is when I got certified in palmistry. And so I started seeing similarities from palmistry into the kiss readings. And that's like, oh, well, okay, wait a second. I can see this. I can understand this.
They both are science. They both have science based on them.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a huge calling for people to be able to identify a lip that belongs to a certain person
Yeah.
and the characteristics that go with it.
Yeah.
And so it is a real thing.
It's definitely a real thing, but it's funny because like I said, I'll be the first person to admit that I thought at first I was like, no, no, that's kind of gimmicky. Um, you know that there are some things that I just will refuse to do. I won't do it because it does have a science based background, but I would never
Mm-hmm.
use it for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that comes from the whole being a counselor and being a life coach is not trying to manipulate and not trying to coerce. It's more
Mm-hmm.
to like, you tell me what you need, and let's see if you can figure it out by yourself. And then I can give you some prompting at that time. I, yeah, so that there's some things that I won't do, but I will admit that I kind of had it out for kiss readings at first, but when I started learning how to do it and actually started doing it, I'm wholeheartedly on board.
Yeah. It kind of ranks right up there with fingerprints. So it makes sense that it would remind you of palm reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you had ever told me like 3 years ago that I would have been getting into palmistry, I would have told you that that was a party trick. That was something that that people went around and said that they knew how to do, and it
Mm-hmm.
didn't really mean anything. It just was like, oh, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at this line, and then I'm going to tell you this about this line. And I was like, nah.
Ooh.
Like when I started actually studying with, he's a gentleman from India. And the first thing he told me, he goes, if you believe that this works, I'm not going to teach you. And I'm like,
Whoops.
yeah, I was like, okay. And so what he did to really change my mind was he says, I want you to send me a picture of your hand. And so he sent me a picture of my hand, or I sent him a picture of my hand, and it scared me. It like literally scared me, like how much he was able to like come out and say this. And when he did the reading on this hand, he goes, so now I want you to take the picture of your other hand and send that to me. And then he gave the roots of all the reasons why this hand was the way that it was. And it was from childhood all the way up through through high school and college and going into college. And I was like, you came in with this, 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 and this, and that's why you have this, 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 and this.
Oh,
And
yay. Where were you when I was 10?
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I've kind of been approaching when people kind of approach with new ideas. I don't approach it anymore as like, oh, that's like kiss reading. I don't. I'm just like, okay, well, let's look at it. Let's discover it.
Yep.
And go from there. So, I mean, and I've actually, I mean, to tell you the truth, Miles of Smiles events, the podcast, the happy hour of the spiritual neighborhood, we've had guests on here that have spurred me to go on and to look at new things. And so that's kind of one of the reasons one of the guests came to us and started talking about human design. Audra, I believe it was Audra Wally.
Yes. Audra's going
Um,
to talk to us the last Monday of June.
Sweet, sweet. I can't wait to
Yeah.
talk with her again. But she kind of spurred me on, and was like, and one of the questions that I've always had is like, why did I have such a problem learning tarot? Like
Mhm.
I cannot learn tarot like from like, here's the book, here's where the card, here's the book, here's the card. I can't do it. Okay. It just does not stick. And as she helped me determine like what my human design type was, it started making sense to me that the reason that I can't do that is because I'm a manifester. So I have to create the meaning. If it's
Yes.
not created by me, I can't take you at your word that that's what it means.
Well, I think that we interpret the card according to the energy we're receiving from the person.
That
So
too. Yeah.
it has to be personal to that
Yeah.
person. It can't just, you know, because I can remember putting down the abandonment card and I said, oh, wow, someone has really abandoned you either from a project or maybe from a personal reason. And he went, how do you know? I said, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
He was like, how in the hell? So yeah, but you put the card down and you're reading their energy. How does this pertain to them? Is it personal? Is it business? Is it, so it's about all about interpretation.
So let me ask you a question because someone asked me this the other day, and I thought it was a really interesting question. Has there ever been a time that you walked away from this and said, "I'm not doing it. I'm going to stay away from the whole psychic, the whole intuitive,
Well,
that lifestyle. I'm going to walk away from it."
I think that I put it on the back burner because when my father died, I got that premonition, and then when the big tornado in Wichita Falls came, I got another premonition, which is what I told my friend that said I was not psychic. I told her, "Don't go over there. There's going to be a big tornado," and she went anyway. And then she called me and said, "How did you know?" And I said, "Because I'm psychic." And so um, it's about being sensitive. I think more about using your intuition, but at that point, a couple of years later, I had kids, and it was like, I don't have time for, I don't know, delving into it. I had always wanted to learn to read the tarot, but I didn't do that until like 2009. So it was many years later, after my kids were grown, that I returned, that
I can't say that I ever like really walked away, or made the choice to be like, I'm not doing this. Um, we all have circumstances in our life that kind of get in the way sometimes. I mean, my transplant, um, when I went through my transplant, my kidney transplant, that stuff kind of went on the side burner because my body, my mind, everything was focused on healing and getting back, to the point where I
and I
could
can see
actually
that.
live,
And that's
you
true.
know.
I can see
And
that.
and so, I mean, I was doing 2 to 3 fairs a month, and so I had to step away from those. I mean, I couldn't go out in public, and so it was like I didn't have like a large base of people to connect with. It wasn't until it took almost 2 years for me to kind of get back into like going out, finding. But anyway, as I was saying, that I don't think I ever really intentionally stepped away from it or made that conscious choice. I mean, I knew I had to for health reasons. I'm so glad that I'm back, and I'm so glad that I've have opportunities to to talk about what I'm passionate about. And just take it to the next level.
Well,
But
we're coming up on uh, an hour.
yeah.
So tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Well, you can go to my website, which is matthewapierce.com. So matthewapierce.com. And my email address is like right here at that side of the screen. So Matthew at
Yeah, to the other
matthewapierce.com.
side of the screen, Matthew.
Oh, it's on that side. Okay, well, so like right here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at it on my screen, but I think it's like over here.
Yes, it
So
is.
but you can go there, and that has kind of like what I do as far as counseling. It has some blog articles. I have 3 or 4 other businesses that kind of keep me busy as well. So, from anywhere from website development, design, back-end, like office integrations, to t-shirt design, you name it, I probably have a dabbling in it right now. So,
Yeah.
but
Okay. Well, I enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope somebody gets something out of, I don't know, just putting yourself out there and listening to your intuition.
well,
It's all
tell
there.
people how
It's
they
there.
can get a hold of you and get a hold of some of your
Oh, me.
amazing
Well,
products.
Luann, Luann, at ancientherbalapothecary.com, which is my herbal business. And Deborah, go to DeborahColleenRose.com to learn all about what Deborah does besides Mazel Smiles. So we love being here and giving you information that we hope will help you. And please come back next week when Matthew has another well, an invitation to one of his friends. And
Yes,
gonna talk.
absolutely.
Okay.
So be looking for that announcement. We'll be announcing on Facebook with all the details. So,
Okay. Great.
yeah.
So bye for now.
Talk to y'all later. Bye bye.